William was at Pearl Harbor that fateful morning in December 1941. Now, the way he tells the story, he was standing there. They quickly got into a truck and took off, and just as they took off, a bomb dropped where they were. So William lived to tell the tale. The 2,403 Americans did not that morning. Tomorrow we pause to give honor to the countless lives lost defending the dream of America, to the hundreds of thousands of young adults who lined up in perfect rows at Antietam or poured out of Higgins boats to storm the beach at Normandy, or worked through the tunnel systems in Vietnam, or swept through the neighborhoods in Bagram or Kandahar. Though I take a very dim view of the efficacy of war, I do hold with deepest gratitude and love all those who answered the call they heard to protect the dream of America, the dream of a nation of laws, not men, a nation of equality and opportunity, not oppression and grift, a nation of principles, not obedience to a tyrant. And so today I ask, how do you pay your respects and gratitude to those who gave their lives to the dream of this country, while acknowledging that this country is becoming the thing they fought against? How do we honor America when the dream, the imagination of what America could be, is still, as Langston Hughes so precisely put it, a dream deferred? Memorial Day this year feels off, disjunct. There's a cognitive dissonance at play because I want to feel gratitude and hope and pride, but there's a good chance that if you're with me here today, if you're alive and awake to the world, you're not feeling that. You might be feeling despair, maybe some hopelessness. So maybe you think to yourself, let's turn to the young adults. They're always so hopeful. And that's actually where the news gets worse. In a 2022 National College Health Assessment, 66% of college students reported feeling hopeless. And a 2023 Harvard study shows that 44% of Americans under 30 feel hopeless. I could go on, but I think you've got the point. You see, they're coming into a job market and an economy that looks very different than the one I came into. In the 1980s, for example, the average first-time home buyer was 29 years old. Last year, it was 38. The climate is a disaster, and whatever commitments we've made as a nation to be part of an international effort, we've pulled out of all of those. The Middle East remains a disaster. Racism, homophobia, transphobia are now getting legally protected, while women's bodily autonomy isn't. The young ones are not being moody. They're alive and awake to the world as it is, and this world is not doing well. This despair is part of man, and I mean that literally. I'm quoting now from Steve Bannon, which I don't often do, but this is Steve Bannon, who is a policy advisor to the current president, and this is back in 2019. So when I say that this is a plan, this has been in the works. This is Steve Bannon in 2019. Now, the opposition party is the media hopelessness, powerlessness. So you understand when I say it's hard to find a good way to honor those who sacrificed for the dream of America. That's the thing about hopeful imagination. It doesn't work well under duress. It is hard to be imaginative under sustained duress. Plenty of psychological studies demonstrate that the mind or the brain that is depressed or traumatized struggles to imagine positive futures. We become more like Hoot than Olive. Let me put it this way. If you're out on a cold, snowy walk in the woods, just for fun, you can easily imagine coming back to your warm place, putting a blanket over your shoulders, and making some cocoa. But if you survive a plane crash in northern Alaska, you stop imagining cocoa pretty soon. A hopeful, positive imagination requires a sense of safety, a sense of security. And that is hard for us to do for our nation when we experience muzzle velocity. We're not the first people throughout time or space to feel overwhelmed, right? It's not just us in this one moment. So how have people navigated these challenges in the past? Well, one very common way is through a kind of faith, a kind of deep belief that the better world you are imagining is possible, a belief that we can make a way out of no way. Here's an example, the Israeli poet Ehud Manor. Think 1968, so 1 year after a devastating 1967 war. The next year, 1968, Ehud loses his brother, his closest brother. His grief was palpable. And so he wrote a poem that became lyrics to one of the most popular songs, Bashana Haba'a. And the lyrics translated go like this: next year, we will sit on the porch and count migrating birds. Children on vacation will play catch between the house and the fields. You will yet see how good it will be next year. A hopeful imagination. The whole canon of songs, even in the titles alone, the Lord will make a way. The storm is passing over. It's going to be a brighter day. That last one's my favorite song. Songs have this power to lift us out of our rumination, to literally put words of hope into our voices. And the arts have that power. The arts have that power to free us into imagination. Fiction helps us see beyond the world directly in front of us today. Speculative fiction authors, N.K. Jemisin, Octavia Butler, these are master storytellers of what possibilities arise after the crucible, after the difficult thing. You may be familiar with Octavia Butler's masterwork, Parable of the Sower. And so the people in this post-apocalyptic world develop a new way of being, a new religion called Earthseed. Premise that the worst thing has already happened. The bombs dropped, the plague spread, the climate made that continent uninhabitable. That's already happened. And then they imagine what comes next. What possibilities emerge after your worst fear is confirmed? And I want to lift that point up because if we're being honest with ourselves, most of our fears stop right before the thing itself, right before that apocalyptic event. But after that event, and then they imagine. And there is a liberation in knowing that we as people can imagine beyond the worst case, that we can see a way out of no way. I had a really specific and surprising feeling a little while back. I was at a recent community-wide protest that was going on across the nation. And so there I was on College Avenue in Appleton with several thousand other members of the community. And I recognized folks from all these different places. Oh, that's folks from the Presbyterian Church. Those are folks from the Lutheran Church. There are all of my fellow UUs, of course. But it was also, oh, I know that guy from the YMCA, or oh, I've seen her at Woodman's before, or I've seen that person at the library. And there's this very specific feeling that arose for me that morning. Oh, thank God it's not just me. Walking to that protest thinking, what if it's just me? It's not just me. Other people see this. Here is community, here is connection, here is belonging, because I had been experiencing the carefully planned muzzle velocity privately. On my Zoom classes, in my home, in very specific value-oriented spaces where most of the people in the room think that Americans should get a trial before being shipped to super prisons in other nations. But the despair, the isolation was creeping in. The plan was working on me. But then I saw all of these other people from all these different spaces and places and traditions, and they too were saying, no, habeas corpus is actually... Okay, let's not get into that. They too remembered that morning the dream of America. Thank God it's not just me. You see, what I was missing, what I want to encourage us all to find, is the imagination that helps you see that you are part of a web of existence, an international community that sees you and says, it's not just you. We see this too, and we care. Once we break free of that sense of isolation, what is that, negative grandiosity? That sense that you alone are experiencing Bannon's muzzle velocity. Well, then we can begin to see that we are so much stronger than I am or you are. We can begin to imagine how a critical mass of people can work together to put love back at the center, to put justice and equity and pluralism back into our nation's commitments to its dream. That doesn't mean we get to wish away the very immediate problems, right? Jobs are still getting chainsawed, coastlines are now getting drilled, ICE is still in the community. But close your eyes for a minute and imagine how much better and how much more work is being done and will be done by that critical mass of people who believe in a better, more just, equitable, and loving America. And once you got your imaginators working, you can see that work gaining its momentum like a snowball rolling downhill. Can you see it? Can you feel it? I am so deeply grateful that William got in that truck and got past that bomb at Pearl Harbor. He was my grandfather. If he hadn't, I and 50-something other Sikhs would never have existed. I should mention, William never stormed Normandy Beach or Guadalcanal. I don't think he ever fired the rifle. He was an electrician. He was one of the many civilians at Pearl Harbor wiring the base and wiring the boats. So I ask myself sometimes, did Grandpa lie in bed in 1942 wondering, is my work enough? Am I doing enough to fight this fascism? I'll never know. I didn't get to ask him. And I'm not an expert in military strategy, but I do know that it is hard to plan in the dark. You need electricians. So I like to hope that he understood that this was all part of the international effort. Beloveds, do not get lost in that negative grandiosity question. Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Because that still means it's you versus fascism. The question is, what is my role in our collective effort to further the dream of America? To all the ancestors and beloveds who served or are serving, thank you. I am deeply grieved that we live in a world where warfare is still present, and I'm grateful beyond words for your service. And so as we dine on hot dogs and corn and apple pie or whatever it is that you do tomorrow, I don't know what your meal plan is, but I do ask you to pause before your first bite. Pause for a moment and grieve, lament the space between the dream of America and our present. Lament that dream deferred. And then imagine, if only for a moment, the possibility of America, the possibility of a more just and equitable and compassionate and sustainable and loving America. And then finally, as you start to get really hungry, imagine how many of us are also doing the same thing. Do you feel that? It's the feeling of people rising above this stupid muzzle velocity game. It's the feeling of us reclaiming power and keeping it